Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. Let's recap the week with keywords that made headlines this week. The Constitutional Court held what was supposed to be the final 8th hearing on Thursday, but decided to hold one more hearing next Tuesday for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial over his martial law declaration to summarize both sides' arguments. U.S. President Donald Trump slapped a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming into his country, as well as reciprocal tariffs on every country that imposes duties on U.S. imports. Ahead of the third anniversary of Russia's war in Ukraine, Trump held phone talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, where the two sides agreed to start peace talks to put an end to the crisis. It seems the end is near for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial, as the last hearing was supposed to be held on Friday. But as fierce clashes continued at the Constitutional Court, the hearings have been extended for a 9th session this coming Tuesday. To make sense of what's been going on so far, we have our Oh Soo-young in the studio who's been covering the case for us. Welcome back, Soo-young.
Nice to be here again, Tammy.
So, Soo-young, there have been a total of 8 hearings so far. First, remind us what the main arguments were.
Sure. So the National Assembly's impeachment panel, which is pushing for Yoon's removal from office, set out 5 main grounds for impeachment. They claimed that Yoon's declaration of martial law itself was illegal, as he did not go through cabinet procedures, as well as proclamation of martial law decrees. The panel says Yoon also tried to disrupt parliamentary activities by deploying troops to the National Assembly, as well as the National Election Commission, an independent constitutional body, as well as trying to arrest judicial figures. Meanwhile, Yoon's side insists it was constitutional as an executive right of the president, and that the opposition party had made it impossible for the government to function by constantly impeaching officials and dramatically cutting the budget. Yoon's lawyers also cited suspicions of election fraud at the National Election Commission and called to investigate their servers and ballot papers for irregularities. So taking these arguments into account, the justices are examining whether the martial law was legal and whether it was justified.
But there have been some complications as testimonies were not consistent. Tell us more about that.
That's right. So statements recorded by prosecutors and in the media as well before the impeachment trial seem like pretty damning evidence for President Yoon, as he allegedly told troops to drag out lawmakers from parliament and arrest politicians. But some military officials who'd stated the above ended up giving a different account in the courtroom, and Yoon has also denied all charges. There was much confusion over whether Yoon has said legislators, or 의원 in Korean, or other words like yoon, which means agents, or 인원, which means persons. Under heavy questioning, former Special Warfare Commander Kwak Jong-un changed his words in court to say that Yoon had told him to pull out the persons, or 인원, not legislators, from parliament. Meanwhile, former Defence Minister Kim Yong-yeon said that the order had been to pull out military agents sent to the assembly. Another point of conflict is regarding whether Yoon went through cabinet procedures before declaring martial law. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok claimed there wasn't a proper cabinet meeting, but former Interior Minister Lee Sang-min and National Security Advisor Shin Won-sik told the court they believe a proper meeting was held, although they didn't agree with the martial law. Also, there are contradictory claims surrounding the alleged list of figures Yoon sought to arrest. Former National Intelligence Service Deputy Director Hong Jang-won claimed he was told by Yoon to aid the Counterintelligence Command's arrest operation and was read a list of names that he scribbled down outside in the dark. His boss, though, Director Cho Tae-yong, has suggested Hong lied, saying that CCTV footage show he was in his office at the time he claims to have written the memo. And Cho also raised doubt over Hong's political neutrality, saying that he asked for 7 separate personnel favours from an opposition party politician.
So there have been questions whether the court will extend the trial. How is the court managing the pace of the trial?
Yes, the court has been moving very quickly, rejecting most, if not all, objections to the proceedings raised by Yoon's team. Justices scheduled multiple trial hearings at once without consultation and chose not to postpone a hearing date when Yoon was initially arrested and physically couldn't make it to his own trial. They also rejected most of the over 30 witnesses Yoon applied for, just approving 8 from his side as of Thursday and 7 from the National Assembly side, while during former President Park Geun-hye's trial, 36 witnesses were selected. All of this has caused concerns that due process is being neglected. Public trust in the Constitutional Court is not very high at the moment, at 54%, while distrust is at 41%.
Ultimately, whether the Constitutional Court decides to dismiss or uphold the impeachment, the ruling must serve to end the division and turmoil in our country. Thus, it is not enough for the justices to simply believe their ruling is correct. Rather, the public must see it as reasonable and justifiable. In this regard, the court has thus far failed to appropriately address various controversies surrounding its political orientation and so on.
Now, given the left-leaning orientation of 3 justices, as well as alleged ties to opposition party leader Lee Jae-myung and the National Assembly's impeachment panel, the court would look politically biased if it delivers a very speedy verdict, as it would benefit Lee Jae-myung, who's set to run as the opposition's main presidential candidate. Regardless of the ruling, experts say what matters is due process and more transparency from the court.
In the case of former President Park Geun-hye, the ruling was unanimous at 8-0. That's why the public accepted the Constitutional Court's decision as a legal judgment rather than a political one. Even conservative justices agreed that her removal was justified, making it clear that the ruling was not based on political views. However, in President Yoon's case, if the decision ends up being split at 4-4 or 5-4 if all 9 take part, it's unclear whether the public will accept such a divided ruling.
For now, a 9th trial date has been set for Tuesday, but it remains to be seen whether justices will allow for more witnesses to be scheduled beyond that point. If the hearings conclude next week, then we can expect a ruling in early March, given that former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment was upheld in 11 days and former President Roh Moo-hyun's was dismissed in 14 days.
Well, we will have to wait and see. Thank you, Soo-young, for coming in today.
Thanks so much for having me.
U.S. President Donald Trump pushed his tariff plans hard this week. First, by raising steel and aluminum tariffs to 25%. They will be effective as of March 12th, giving countries like South Korea just a month to brace for the impact. Our Park Gun-woo leads us this weekend.
U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order at the White House on Monday to impose new 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, set to be effective from March 12th.
It's 25% without exceptions or exemptions. If it's made in the United States, there is no tariff. All you have to do is make it in the United States.
The White House also noted countries including South Korea that were exempt from tariffs during Trump's first administration will now be subject to them. South Korea was the 4th largest steel and aluminum exporter to the U.S. last year. Trump also warned on Monday of the possibility of imposing tariffs on items including automobiles and chips, exports that are critical to South Korea's economy. On top of South Korea, Asian countries including China, which are also among the largest trading partners, according to 2024 data from the U.S. Department of Commerce, are set to be affected. However, in other parts of the world, Trump is considering exemptions for Australia, given that the U.S. has a trade surplus with the country due to its significant purchases of U.S. aircraft. Nonetheless, Trump's move is raising fears over the impact of an escalating trade war. Canada, the country that exports the most steel and aluminum to the U.S., and another major trading partner, Mexico, are expected to be among the worst hit. Trump's latest announcement follows plans revealed by the U.S. president the day before to set reciprocal tariffs on countries that tax goods imported from the U.S. Trump said those measures will be implemented in the next few days, adding that he is unconcerned about potential retaliation. That has prompted a strong warning from the European Union.
We stand against unjustified barriers to free and fair trade. We will always take the necessary steps to protect our economic interests, as well as European businesses, workers and consumers from unjustified tariff measures.
While describing the tariffs as unlawful and economically counterproductive, Olaf Jill, the European Commission spokesman, also said the EU remains committed to constructive talks with the US to find mutually beneficial solutions. 박건우, Arirang News.
And on top of the 25% tariffs, the Trump administration is now customizing reciprocal tariffs that are set to be effective as early as April. The logic is increasing U.S. tariffs to match the tax rates that other countries charge on imports. Our Shin Ha-young has the details.
U.S. President Donald Trump reinforced his push to impose reciprocal tariffs on global trade partners to match the tax rates that other countries impose on imports, fueling fears of a trade war. On Thursday, Trump signed a presidential memorandum ordering a comprehensive plan for reciprocal tariffs, aiming to deliver a level playing field for American workers.
On trade, I have decided, for purposes of fairness, that I will charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them, no more, no less.
The latest announcement comes as part of Trump's aggressive push for more balanced trade following recent 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. Trump's tariffs would also target countries with non-tariff trade barriers such as subsidies, burdensome regulations, and value-added taxes. Another element to be considered is exchange rate policies in countries. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said his team would be ready to hand a plan to the president by April 1st. Although South Korea has signed a free trade agreement with the U.S. and has eliminated most tariffs, Trump's plan to consider non-tariff barriers could lead to him imposing reciprocal tariffs on South Korea. South Korea posted a record trade surplus with the U.S. last year. Trump has also signaled potential tariffs on automobiles, with the White House also seeking to renegotiate the U.S. Chips and Science Act, which could affect South Korea's top two exports to the U.S., raising concerns about further economic impact. Despite fears of a global economic slowdown, Trump is expected to continue his hardline tariff policy. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Now, included on Trump's tariff list so far are steel and aluminum. Concerns also grow as cars and semiconductor chips, which ultimately feed the South Korean economy, could be next in line. Our Peunji has this report.
Starting March 12th, the United States will be imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. And this is set to affect many countries, including South Korea. Announcing this, U.S. President Donald Trump said that he's also looking at tariffs on cars and semiconductor chips to create jobs.
But we'll be talking about other subjects like cars. We'll be talking about drugs and pharmaceuticals. We'll be discussing chips. And we're going to be doing some other things in addition to that, all which will bring in a lot of jobs into our country. Cars is going to be a very big one and a very important one.
Trump's comments have raised more concerns in South Korea, as cars and semiconductors take up more than 30% of the country's total exports to the United States. S&P Global Ratings said in a report released in November that a potential 20% tariff on imports from South Korea could cut Hyundai and Kia's earnings by up to 19%. As for chips, experts say that the potential tariff hikes on chips are not likely to have a significant impact on Korean companies for the time being.
As for memory chips, there's not really a product in the market that can replace South Korean chips. So considering the time until the tariffs start to have an impact, for example, the time needed for South Korea to build a semiconductor factory in the US, I don't think it will have that much of an impact in the semiconductor industry for now.
But pundits warn the message that Trump is trying to say is clear: to pressure foreign companies.
Using tariffs, they're trying to pressure South Korean companies to make it more beneficial to the United States when those companies invest in the U.S.
To avoid tariff risks, industry watchers say that it's now more important than ever for Korean semiconductor manufacturers such as Samsung and SK hynix to secure deals with big tech companies in the U.S. Peunji, Arirang News.
According to a state-run think tank here in the country, the South Korean economy will expand by 1.6% this year, which is lower than what other major agencies like the OECD project. Now, the lower projection came from the ongoing political crisis and deepening troubles and worries over Trump's reckless tariff policies. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
South Korea's economic growth projection for the year has been slashed on the back of rising uncertainties with U.S. trade tariffs and continued political instability in the country. In its outlook published on Tuesday, the state-run Korea Development Institute forecast the economy to grow 0.9% in the first half of 2025 and 2.2% in the second half, bringing the annual growth rate to 1.6%. That's down by 0.4 percentage points from its previous forecast of 2% released in November. This is lower than forecasts from major institutions such as the OECD at 2.1%, but similar to the Bank of Korea's projection of 1.6 to 1.7%. The agency noted that the prolonged slump in domestic demand exacerbated by political turmoil in the country, combined with a slowdown in exports, is weighing down on economic growth. The construction sector remains in recession while the service sector struggles to recover. Despite strong semiconductor demand, the goods exports were revised down from 1.9% to 1.5%, reflecting deteriorating trade conditions. Weak domestic demand is, however, likely to limit inflationary pressure, keeping the KDI's consumer price inflation forecast at 1.6%. It is also expected to affect the labor market as sluggish domestic demand limits job growth. These projections, however, come with the KDI assuming that U.S. trade restrictions under the Trump administration would be implemented gradually. The faster-than-expected policy moves have significantly increased uncertainty.
If trade tensions under Trump escalate further or political instability drags on longer than expected, growth could fall below the 1.6% we've projected.
That being said, the agency pointed out that tariffs on steel and aluminium are unlikely to have a great impact on the country's GDP growth.
Steel and aluminium make up about 0.8% of our total exports to the US, so in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge portion of our overall portions. If the tariffs do go into effect, these industries would take a significant hit, but in terms of GDP, we don't expect the impact to be that substantial.
With weak consumption, slowing exports, and persistent uncertainty both at home and abroad, the KDI's latest outlook signals that the country's economic recovery remains vulnerable. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Ahead of the 3-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, U.S. President Donald Trump said this week negotiations to end the Ukraine war will start immediately after holding what he calls a highly productive phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Our Choi Min-jung tells us more.
The United States and Russia have reportedly agreed to begin talks to stop the war in Ukraine. U.S. President Donald Trump posted on social media on Wednesday that he spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin about ending the almost 3-year-long war. Trump said he had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with Putin and that their respective teams have agreed to start negotiations immediately.
I think I can say with great confidence he wants to see it ended also. That's good. And we're going to work toward getting it ended and as fast as possible.
The two leaders also agreed to meet in the future, with Putin inviting Trump to Moscow. Trump said he would likely meet with Putin in the not-too-distant future, probably in Saudi Arabia. Trump also held a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday, which Zelensky described as a long, substantive discussion.
President Trump informed me of what Putin told him. We believe that America's strength, together with us and all our partners, is enough to pressure Russia and Putin into peace.
Following Trump's separate phone calls with both the leaders of Russia and Ukraine, the White House confirmed that the conversations went very well and that all three sides were committed to peace.
It is time to stop this ridiculous war where there has been massive and totally unnecessary death and destruction.
On Friday, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio are set to attend the Munich Security Conference and reaffirm Washington's determination to end the war. The vice president is scheduled to hold in-person talks with Zelensky that day as well. Meanwhile, European foreign ministers and officials warned that the future of Ukraine could not be decided without Europe or Kyiv. Last week, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen urged unity against Moscow, stating that lasting peace for Ukraine depends on military and financial strength. Choi Min-jang, Arirang News.
North Korea this week started to destroy a reunion center for separated families near the inter-Korean border amid strained ties with the South. South Korea urged the regime to immediately stop its actions. Our correspondent Peunji reports.
The Inter-Korean Family Reunion Center, located at Kumgangsan Mountain, has been a symbol of peace, as it has been used to host tearful reunions of families separated for decades by the Korean War. Since 2009, it has hosted 5 meetings between families from the two Koreas, and the last family reunion was held there in August 2018. But on Thursday, the South Korean government said the North has begun dismantling the facility in the latest sign of strained inter-Korean ties, after the regime described the South as its principal enemy. The Unification Ministry spokesperson urged the North to immediately halt its actions, adding that the government plans to consider legal measures over the action and a joint response with the international community.
The demolition of the facility is an anti-humanitarian act that tramples on the wishes of separated families and a violation of South Korea's assets.
Upon an agreement between the two Koreas, the 12-story reunion center was built in July 2008 at a cost of over $35 million. The building was the last remaining South Korean-owned facility in the Kumgangsan Mountain tourist region, as the North has been demolishing facilities there over the past few years. After the Hanoi summit between the United States and North Korea ended in failure in February 2019, Kim Jong-un visited the resort area later that year in October and ordered the removal of South Korean facilities there, saying they were shabby and that they looked like makeshift tents in a disaster-stricken area. Since 2022, the regime has destroyed other facilities, including a hotel, a fire station, and a golf clubhouse, leaving only the reunion center, which it has also started to tear down. Peunji, Arirang News.
This past Wednesday was a Jeongwol here in Korea, the first full noon of the Lunar New Year. It's celebrated on the 15th day of the first lunar month, and in the year 2025, it fell on February 12th. On the night of the brightest full moon, the tradition of watching the moon rise and praying for prosperity and well-being held a deep significance in Korea's agricultural society. It was a day to drive away bad luck and bring good fortune, and was celebrated with food and traditional games. One tradition is having a bonfire known as 달집 on the night of Jeongwol. This 달집 is a pile of straw and firewood stacked together and set alight during the evening of Jeongwol to drive away negative energy. And of course, even without a bonfire, people made wishes for their loved ones on the day.
I wrote a wish for the health and peace of my beloved family and for all their endeavors.
I wished for my family to stay healthy and safe.
And despite the brutal winter conditions here in the country, a rigorous training session that puts the ultimate test the resolve and resilience of South Korean soldiers took place as in any other winter time. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has his story.
It is below zero outside, but Korean soldiers are braving this extreme cold, aiming to enhance their collective defense capabilities and ensure readiness even in the most challenging conditions. South Korea's Naval Special Warfare Flotilla, known as the UDT SEAL, this week started their high-intensity winter exercises. Rigorous drills with members asked to do amphibious landings, navigate through rough seas, and conduct inland infiltration exercises hone their skills in both maritime and terrestrial operations.
The Navy Special Warfare operators, following the UDT SEAL motto of nothing is impossible, will be fully prepared to complete their missions in any extreme environment, at sea, on land, or in the air.
Grueling exercises are not limited to the sea. Around 500 soldiers from the Marine Corps reconnaissance battalions endure the cold in the mountains as well, as they began winter training in Pyeongchang and the surrounding area of Hwangbyongsan Mountain. On the mountain covered with snow, soldiers practiced fast roping, descending a thick rope, allowing troops to be deployed from a helicopter in places where aircraft cannot land. They master individual ski maneuvering skills to be able to ensure rapid mobility. Keeping in mind their role as reconnaissance battalions, having to provide quick, accurate information on an uncertain battlefield to secure a military advantage, the soldiers say they dedicate themselves to the training.
We will continue to dedicate ourselves to training and education to become a strong Marine Corps that the public can always trust.
김보경, Arirang News.
That wraps it up for us this weekend. Thank you so much for staying with us and enjoy your weekend wherever you are.